little girl being told every day that I was beautiful,
black is beautiful, baby, black is bold,
that I was brilliant, that I was strong, and that I was capable. And I just got on Facebook and I put Ethiopia, I have to come back. Creativity is a tool for liberation.
The Africans living in America or anywhere else, outside of Africa that is, are not African.
We actually are interconnected and interdependent of one another. People are still afraid of being black. The main art form that has no border, which is music.
How did your experiences in Denver, particularly co-founding the Grow House and founding the Pan-African Arts Society, shape your approach to art, community engagement, and social impact?
So right now I live between two places in the United States. I live in Oakland, California, which is in Northern California, near San Francisco, right across the bay from San Francisco. And I also live in my hometown of Detroit, Michigan. And I haven't lived in Detroit since I was a teenager. So 2 years ago, during the COVID pandemic uprisings, lots of people in the United States moved. They moved from where they were. They moved a lot of the tech industry people who work in San Francisco, which is part of Silicon Valley, the birthplace of the computer and Facebook and Twitter, all of that is Silicon Valley. A lot of those people left because they could. All of a sudden, these jobs that you claimed couldn't be done remotely could be.
Could be done. Remotely.
And so they left, right? Yeah. And then a lot of people moved away. The rent in the Bay Area is like second most expensive housing market in the United States, next to New York City. So if you're not making any money, if you're making a lot less money, a lot of people said, I can actually live well or better somewhere else. And my partner and I decided to, move home. Honestly,
sometimes Denver.
Home in Detroit. Home in Detroit. Sorry. So look, I'm going to get to the Denver part. Okay. Hold on. So I live in these two places now: Detroit, Michigan, home of the car, all of those birthplace of the highway, birthplace of the Motown music, birthplace of, techno music if you're into that. But when we left, and I was a teenager, we moved to Denver, Colorado. My mother is from Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
And I lived there for 29 years. Finished high school there, got married there, had 2 children there, went to college and graduate school there. And it is the place where I got to kind of explore and blossom because I was an adult. So, in Denver, Colorado, I kind of came of age in a way in which going to college, being a young mother,
What did you study?
As an undergrad.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I studied African American studies and speech communication. The reason that I studied speech communication is that because as a child and a young person, I was extremely shy. Shy. People would come to visit, I would hide. My mother would try to introduce me to people in public, I would get under her clothes. Extremely shy. I could not give my valedictorian speech because I could not speak in public. I would not. So I said, I have to get through this. Yeah. I have to get through. It was just debilitating, my level of shyness. I am still a very shy person. What I have learned to do is turn on a switch. I know how to turn on the switch, and then I go home and I put on my pajamas and I don't want to talk to anyone for a few days. So that's what I've learned how to do, and getting a degree in speech helped me learn how to do that. So inside of those two focuses as an undergrad, I decided that I wanted to be a curator, which is something I always knew I wanted to be. My father, the artist, who took me to art class with him. My mother, who took me to the ballet, to the museum, to the symphony. My sister and I had a very artful life in Detroit. Detroit, Michigan is a very musical, artful city. And so that was kind of the norm. It wasn't some odd thing to go to lots of different cultural experiences. And, in undergrad, the people who were studying art history were pretty much only white students. In Denver is a place with a very small Black African American community there. So I would go sit in the art history classes. And the professor who taught African art It's a white Italian woman. She took her students to Italy every year, to the Biennale every other year. And, you know,
and she's the one that's teaching African art? She's taking them to Italy?
Yes.
Okay.
I told her I wanted to be a curator. She said, and I said, what do I need to do to be a curator? And she gave me this kind of like lineup of having a PhD and art history. And I said, and what are you all studying in art history? And it's like mostly Italian art, mostly European art. And I said, I'm not interested in that.
Exactly.
Why would I do that? But I wanted to do that. And so she said, well, then curate a show and I'll help you. So for my thesis in African American Studies, I curated my first art exhibition with local artists, local Black artists from Denver, and at a arts co-op in the downtown area. And it, you know, the bug got me. The bug.
that was it.
It was like, oh, this is it. This is like, yes, like finally.
Wow.
Because I understood as a child that was a position of power.
Right.
I understood that the person who leads the cultural conversation, who decides what is hung on the wall, who decides what the dynamic or the agenda, the run of show is, that's a position of power.
That's a very interesting way of seeing it.
That's how I saw it as a 7-year-old. And I just kept going with that.
That's amazing though, especially at 7, for you to realize.
I was like, I just asked my dad,
That's
who gets to decide what we're seeing on the wall?
Exactly.
And he said, the curator. I said, I want to be a curator when I grow up.
Yeah.
And I am.
And you became one.
And it's been across genre, across discipline. It's only in the last 14 years been primarily visual art, but it's been film, you know, the Pan-African Film Festival that I founded and ran. I used to work for one of the Black dance companies in the United States, Cleo Parker Robinson Dance Theater. So I was the communication and education director there. You know, so I ran a poetry venue. I worked with Black writers for 15 years.
Wow.
And ran a poetry venue every last Friday of the month. And lots of internationally renowned poets would come and read in Denver, Colorado. And then, you know, so I did all of the things that I wanted to try out.
That's beautiful.
And got burnt out and tired and
sure,
angry and bitter the way that often artists do when we don't feel like we're appreciated or taken care of. And my kids were grown, and I said, I'm going to move. And I moved to Oakland, California.
Which is such a beautiful city.
It's a beautiful place. Northern California is striking. It's stunning.
Out of almost 20 years that I lived in the U.S., the 2 years I lived in Oakland was mind-opening. I mean, you name it and everything. I was like, why did I not know about this place way before? Because I moved a year later. I moved back home.
Yeah.
I just fell in love with Oakland.
What years was that you lived in?
This was in 2005 because I had my first daughter in 2007. So I was there 5 and 6.
I was still in Denver then.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things, I had been traveling to Oakland for a few years as part of a fellowship that I had, and the organization was based in Oakland. But as a child, also my father lived in Manhattan, lived in New York City. So my sister and I spent our summers in New York. So my other home place is either am I going to go home to New York or am I going to go live in California?
Oh my God.
You know, and
what
it was
a
like,
life.
and it was like at that age, I was like, how fast do you want to run, Ashara? All of my friends were still running very fast in New York. I was like, I don't know if I want to run that fast. I'm really kind of burnt out and I'm really tired. Well, I'm going to go try and live in Oakland.
Which is much slower.
But New York City is still my favorite city. It's still my favorite place to be. I don't live there, but I love to be there.
To visit.
It's absolutely. If you know,
especially in your line of work.
If you're an artist, if you if you have other friends who are creative. Yeah.
Absolutely. What motivated you to launch Ashara Ekundayo Gallery as a social practice platform exclusively exhibiting the artwork of Black women and women of African diaspora? And you also co-founded the Black Space Residency and established the Black Curators Lab. How do these initiatives celebrate the dynamic imaginations of Black creatives?
So here's the problem. Yeah. The problem is that I am a curious person, and my Aquarian self wants to know everything because we want to know everything, right? And because I've had enough successes and enough failures that I'm willing to take a risk at things, knowing that sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So all of these things come pouring out of me because I have my own curiosities around them, and I want people to have at least access to the experiences that I have had access to, you know, which keeps coming back to taking care of each other. We are interdependent upon one another. And because I've been cared for, because I've been witnessed, because I've been taken care of, because I've been cared for, then I am capable and willing to care for others. So this taking care of each other is something that I know is part of my karmic work to do. And to be creative, you know, and to be flexible, and to try to be patient. So there's this work that has unfolded in front of me that I have been given space, and I create spaces for people to be creative. One of the things that I had the gift of being part of was a project in Oakland, California called Impact Hub Oakland. It was one of the first co-working spaces in Oakland, California. There were a few already in San Francisco, but none in Oakland. And I was part of a group of 7 people who were all creatives, actually, in some way. Some were literally maker artists, filmmakers, and performers. And we were invited by a global network called Impact Hub that was based in London to create a co-working space, which really had the vibration of that city. And because Oakland is a place, and Northern California is a place that has a very diverse group of, you know, lots of folks from all backgrounds, colors, ethnicities, races, they were able to come and find space there to drop into their own ideas. So, you know, you pay a monthly membership, you sit down, you work. And inside of that, I was the chief creative officer, and I had an art gallery inside of the space. It allowed me to have this total creative license around what other kind of programming could be offered to these innovators, these entrepreneurs, these social entrepreneurs who were sitting, you know, in space doing their own thing. And I bring that up because having the opportunity to also have an art gallery inside the 16,000 square foot retrofitted car dealership in downtown Oakland gave me access to a lot of different ways of thinking and a lot of different artists, you know, to show inside of, you know, this two-story space.
What a brilliant idea,
It was kind of, yeah, so there were these impact hubs all over the world. And we were, you know, all over the United States and all over the world. And because we were a group of people of color, not all of the founders were white. And this concept internationally has mostly been led by white people. When they wanted to launch impact hubs on the continent of Africa, they actually asked the Oakland team to be the teachers, and they actually needed creative collateral from us because they had no pictures of Black people co-working. They had no pictures of Black people lecture inside of this global network. So there's Impact Hub in Nairobi, Kenya. That's still open. There's Impact Hub in Johannesburg, South Africa.
So what does Impact Hub? What is it?
It doesn't even exist anymore as a brand. But the idea is that it was as a global network of co-working spaces where people could come and work on their new projects, their startups. You know, businesses could have their offices there. People could rent out the space to have events, all of those things. That's what co-working is.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that when I was done doing that, but I wasn't done being curator, I wasn't done being a creative director, I opened Ashara Ekundayo Gallery. And at that time, it was touted as the only commercial gallery exclusively showing the work of Black women, women of the African diaspora.
This is a space dedicated to the exclusive experience of the African woman, women of the African diaspora, Black women, American African women, women from all over the world. This is, you know, maybe the 5th iteration of the Black Woman is God for this particular year. I'm honored to be able to hold space with my sisters, for us to teach each other. I'm learning so much from the artists around how to have this kind of gallery.
It is now, and I had that for 2 years, 2017 to 2019. And then I spent more time on my consulting practice, and another endeavor unfolded called Artist as First Responder. So that is the platform that I currently steward. Okay. So I have my consulting firm, and I have my nonprofit community-based social practice organization. And inside of that, the Black Space Residency and the Black Curators Lab unfolded as artist residencies. So one of the things, again, that happened during shelter in place, during the onset of COVID, is that a lot of people in the United States started doing things that they've always wanted to do. They started a company. They took a vacation. They stopped, they did all kinds of things that they didn't feel like they had the opportunity to do before. And so some people had a lot of money and some people had no money. But the people who were able to access an unemployment check from the government, some people pooled money together and bought property. Some people pooled money and started businesses together. And some people went back to school. People got master's degrees online, totally online. So there was all this time. What I found is that there was a sister artist photographer, primarily photographic artist, who I still know very well, Erica Demon, who invited me to create a space, an artist residency in her studio, her physical studio, while she went off to get a master's degree online. And she knew that she was going to have a studio at the university, but she didn't want her studio to be empty because she was in a building with other artists who were primarily all white people. And she wanted to maintain a Black presence in the space. Hence, Black Space Residency. It is an artist residency that started in one artist studio and now has its own studio. Because my primary art practice is a curator, in my studio, I also have a studio in this building as a maker that I don't get to spend much time in, but I created a space for emerging Black curators in the Bay Area to be able to have a space to make. Because I am a curator who likes to make things from time to time. My suspicion is that there were other curators who like to make things from time to time. So that's the Black Curators Lab. Brilliant. So they don't have to come in and curate. They can look at the wall for 3 months if they want to, but they can also come in and make screen printing, photography, ceramics lab, wood shop. All these things are in the building. So again, there's this. I don't have the time right now to be in my own studio much, but I do have time to mentor emerging curators and to make sure that they get some time with these other master teachers in the
That's
building.
Brilliant.
So that's how that all comes together.
Brilliant, because I'm glad you said that, because I actually have a very good friend that is a curator here, and I've been telling her that she needs to meet you. So, and I've always told her that she needs to go do a residency and so on and so forth. So maybe this is this is not just her, it's only because I do know her, but I'm sure there are others in the city. Yeah. So maybe this is a good time to tell our people that to become a good curator, you need X, Y, and Z. Or if there's an opportunity that you or your company actually does for residencies, that these people can come and learn about. Because being a curator, I feel like, is having that eye, right? It starts with having that eye. And then, of course, educating yourself and knowing deeper about it also helps. So if you could tell me...
I don't have the answer for this one.
Right?
I don't. This is a much more complicated kind of situation. I mean, first of all, the word curator has become very common. Yeah. Everybody calls themselves a curator now. But to be one who cares for, who actually is entrusted with the care of, okay. But it's sort of like everybody who has software now who thinks they're a DJ, but who actually have never touched a vinyl record, don't know how to dig for one, have never had to don't know what a stylus is, have never had to clean the dust off the diamond. But you're a DJ, okay. And I have a love for DJs. And this idea of what makes a good curator is... I don't have an answer for it. Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'm an independent curator. There are also people who are curators who work in institutions. They work in museums, or they work at universities, or perhaps they are curator at a foundation that has an art collection, or corporations that collect art, like Coca-Cola, for instance, has an art collection. Microsoft has an art collection. Google has an art collection. So there are curators who make a lot of money and work inside corporate structures or civic institutions like museums. And so they have a team of people that they're working with. They have a budget. They have some creative license and a way in which they plan years and years out what is going to be relevant and on exhibition and on display in those spaces. And I want to say independent curators like myself who work with those curators sometimes, with those institutions or galleries, or also perhaps we have a gallery, that we have a different timeline, and way of thinking about work, in that we are visioning and creating the proposal and the exhibition and often presenting it to that institution or creating space ourselves for it to happen. If I could say there's something that makes for a good curator, is that you actually have to care about the culture. You actually have to have a love for what it is or who it is, or whether it be a group of people or I don't know, but you have to have your own care and own love for it.
Yeah.
Because it's the story that you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
And that's what curators are doing, right? So artist as first responder, like I said, being this current platform is really about amplifying and supporting artists or creatives across the genre whose work heals communities and saves lives. That's the idea of being a first responder, which is a term that I think the first time I recall hearing first responder was during the 9/11 attacks on New York City. Mm. And they kept talking about first responders rushing to the site, right? And, so that's just kind of like been in the back of my mind. And then, here we are with this most recent pandemic, this COVID pandemic. Again, lots of people went in. I happen to be someone who loved shelter in place. It was great for me to stay home for days and weeks and months. I was just happy. I was great.
Exactly.
It's cool. I don't want to
No
talk
problem.
to people. I don't want to talk to you anyway. It's all good.
Exactly.
But allowed me some spaciousness to witness artists showing up first. Again, it's like this is the way it always is. There ain't no party till the artist gets there anyway.
Right.
There's certain people who like the party. There ain't no party till they get there. Period. There's no party until the DJ gets there, until someone starts playing music. To the bands get there's no party. There's no party to the person who cooked the food. That's an artist, right? You talk about artistry? Feed me.
Exactly.
There ain't no party till the food is there. So we show up first in celebration. We also show up first in catastrophe. And so you saw that happen as an example that I use that lots of people can relate to online on Instagram. You saw the DJs play for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours straight. Mm-hmm. Everybody was freaking out. We were scared. What's going on? But I'm gonna turn on this little social media, and this DJ is going to work it out for me. Save my life today. The DJ. You know what I mean? So I just shout out D Nice because he was the DJ that I don't know. He broke the internet that day. That first day that he played for 9 hours. And I think that might have been the second day of like shelter in place in the United States, pretty much shut down the second week of March. Like people were still kind of moving around, like trying to figure it out. And then it was like, shut it down. And if you recall, the first city in the United States to have a total shutdown was San Francisco.
Really?
Uh-huh. San Francisco shut it down before New York City. San Francisco said, oh, we're done. We're done coming to work. All of it. Go lockdown. Put on a mask, wash your hands, lockdown. And Mayor London Breed, who's the first Black woman to be the mayor of a major city in the United States, she was a Black woman, said, I think we might want to stop.
Right.
Take a breath here. Go inside. And the lessons, and I think that also stems from the lessons that San Francisco has offered to the world. They have an understanding of what an epidemic looks like and what that means to like have to stop people from moving in the ways in which they have been moving that would kill them. And as you look at the HIV/AIDS epidemic and then pandemic, it continues to be a pandemic on this planet, but so much of it was centered in that place that like we have some information on how to behave here when you have to stop. So all of those things allowed for, I think, a different level of robustness for creatives who work online, for the institutions that chose to their online programming versus do nothing at all. And, you know, so many people, I had, I mean, really the privilege of being able to like stay home because I didn't work in a first responder kind of job that I had to get up and go out of my house every day and risk becoming sick. I got to stay home and watch free artist talks from museums that I would never have been able to hear, you know, these artists talk. You know what I mean?
I know, our life changed.
It just,
I feel like it was for the better.
I mean, I don't know what happened on the continent because I was in the United States, but the news, which is very distorted in the United States, the messages and the images we were getting is that the continent of Africa was not experiencing COVID in the way in which North America was.
No.
And so we were like, what?
We couldn't be locked down.
Here go the black folks in the United States going, we don't get COVID. Look, the continent of Africa is still cool. So, you know, so there was all this kind of like misinformation. I said, that's actually not true. There's something about living on the continent of Africa that is not true for living in the United States and has everything to do with stress, has everything to do with the food system, has everything to do with the poisoning of it. And how we process the water has everything to do with how we work. It's like that. It's not because you're black. It's because of how we live in the United States. It's so drastically different from the way that most people live on the continent of Africa. That's what I believe. Now I don't. You know, I'm not a scientist.
I know we could not afford to do the lockdown because as you see walking around the city, how many people have you seen on the road that could just lock their door and just call it a day? I'll be home for a month. I mean, we'd all be dead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There are people that have to be out working every single day.
And that's what we called the first responder. So this idea of artists are always responding as well. The artists didn't stop making art.
No.
They made more art.
Exactly.
They made more art. In fact, their art became even more valuable. So collectors, people who have money, bought more art. So they made more art. They're like, I can make more art, I can make more money.
We have more time.
I have more time.
Exactly.
Because I don't have this other job that I go to.
What is the significance of Ashara's media project, Blatant, and its collaboration with the Museum of African Diaspora? How does it contribute to cultural healing and community well-being?
So one of the projects that emerged for me as a curator and as an artist, as a maker, was this zine project. So, you know, zines are like printed, often like political newspapers. Sometimes they're small, but they're usually like kind of scrappy, grassroots, trying to like relay a message to a particular part of community, right? So the Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco is one of the institutions that upped their online programming during COVID. So they went from having, say, 2 things online a week to 25 things online, right? So I was invited to bring this idea of this zine that I had created a year prior to be an online, like, monthly show. Okay. So I curated an online artist talk called Blatant, where I interviewed 2 Black women creatives, you know, visual artists, photographers, dancers. I interviewed them on the ideas of art, joy, rage. You know, it's like this kind of like these ideas of the blatant ways in which we engage each other. It's like, what's making you happy? What are you angry about? You know, what does that mean for your art practice? And so I interviewed over the course of 2 years, 33 Black women, creatives, and also printed a zine. So volume number 1 and volume number 2 happened during COVID. And now volume number 3 is coming out in March. So it's, you know, it's on the side, like, let me, you know, gather these stories from other Black folks around the world. So this 3rd episode, the printed episode of Blatant, will be coming out, and it features the voices of Black artists from Cape Town, South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa, Bahia, Brazil, Detroit, Michigan, and San Francisco and Oakland, California. So, and these are just, some of them are, soundtrack, photography, graphic design, recipes as well.
Very diverse.
Is that because beautiful. All of these, I want to know, art, joy, and rage, art, joy, and peace, art, joy, and beauty. Like what's good? Give me a good recipe. Like
nobody from the continent.
Yes.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Zanele Mahole from South Africa.
Oh, you did say South Africa.
I said South Africa. So
yeah,
Cape Town and Joburg, Tokozani and Daba, some young photographers that I met as well in Cape Town. Their work is in the zine. It's more like, it's not really a poem, but a narrative story by a young brother who I met many, many years ago. So yeah, there's definitely voices from the continent.
Brilliant.
And voices from Brazil. And voices from North America as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
In what ways have you utilized your curatorial residencies to explore and amplify the narratives of Black creatives, both in the Bay Area and beyond? Well,
one of the things that started happening is that I started applying to be artist in residence too.
Okay.
So when you say, how do you use the artist residencies, like as a designer and keeper and director of a residency, but also being an artist in residence, and what has that felt like for me to like step into that space of making? And, because I'm a former gallerist, because I'm a creative director, because I'm someone who has worked with artists, I've always had this kind of like little bit of sadness in the back that I don't have time to like make things. I'm so busy like making space for you to make and show things that I'm not making things. And so when I decided that I was going to make things and actually went and, rented a studio and everything like that, it also meant like, what does it mean for me to be an artist in residence somewhere? So I've utilized the spaces that I've been given as the artist in residence in San Francisco, in Berkeley, California. Right now, I'm doing a residency inside of the Film Archive at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. I'm a research archivist resident in the Film Archive, specifically looking at Black film from the year that I was from 1968 to 1978, and the stories around power and women inside of the film genre. I wouldn't say the industry, but what kind of stories were being told? What were the images being put out? But what were the Black women filmmakers working on? What were they saying at that time? So I'm looking at that particular decade of film. So being able to utilize space that I'm given as well to like bring more people in. Right. That's what that's what power building and power sharing looks like. It's like I'm over here at this museum. I don't work in the museum, but I'm over at this museum. Do you want to come look in this archive with me? It has allowed me to explore, even to make better the own artist residencies that I steward. Like, what would be better? It's like, oh, okay, if they could have access to membership at the museum, maybe I can get them that. Maybe I can get them access to some kind of like software that comes through the residency that I have. So. That's part of it. But the other part of it, I think, is around creating opportunities to invite folks who would not normally come to a museum to come and experience it. Again, I was a child who was taken to the museum. Museums are my happy place. It doesn't matter where I go. I always am going to go to a museum. I went to the museum, the National Museum of Ethiopia, the other day, and got to see Dinkinesh, and that was kind of amazing because I didn't know that their bones were here and that there's an Olmec head outside, and I was just like, oh, it's amazing. But so museums are a happy place for me. And I work in East Oakland and Deep East Oakland. I live in Deep East Oakland now, and many of those young people have never been downtown to the Oakland Museum. They've never been to the Berkeley Museum. They've never been to the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco or the Museum of the African Diaspora. And so how do I create opportunities for museum quality kinds of exhibitions and programming to, one, be brought into that community, but how do I create opportunities for them to come and see the museum? It's just a space. It's an archive. It's not the only kind of archive. We have archives in our community as well. True. So how do we help inspire, activate, ignite, this thought that, well, perhaps I could also be someone who works in a museum. And there are all these other jobs other than the person whose art is hanging on the wall.
Right.
Right? And so that's the same idea if filmmaking, you know, people, we glorify the director of the film, but I am a person because I worked with independent filmmakers for so long. When I ran the Denver Pan-African Film Festival, I read credits. I sit and read credits to every movie that I go to because all of those are art jobs. And I say it when I'm like, people get up and leave. I'm like, look at all those art jobs on the screen. What do you do as an artist? You can't make money as an artist. You can't be an artist. There's 15 minutes of credits after this movie. Those are all artists. Filmmaking is an art form.
Absolutely.
It's a genre. It's a discipline. Those are all art jobs. So I want young people, I want children, I want my own grandchildren to be like, you can absolutely be an artist. And here are all of these different ways that you could live very well and support yourself as an artist. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't make money as an artist. Don't listen to them when they tell you that. Don't listen to them. It's like, look, it's like, you don't have to be the director. You could be the editor.
So many
you could be
things.
the
So many other
these
things.
lights are, it could be the gaffer. You could be the sound engineer. You could do the FX. There's all these art
many
jobs.
different parts.
So many different things to do. And so, you know, so when I think about your question in terms of artist residency, I think about it right now in terms of me and my artist in resident, curator in resident positions, and what that means and how I work in community and how it helps enhance like what I do as a space maker. It's someone I am given space, I make space, I travel through space. I am a time traveler. So what does that mean to like have space and to have something really special in that space that a young person might not have been exposed to?
Even though I don't want this to be the last question, because there's several more, but I think this is a very important question, and we might be able to close with this one. What is the purpose of art and the role of culture and cultural workers in the community? So this goes throughout, you know, on all continents.
Artists show us what is possible, you know, across genre.
True.
You know, movement artists, dancers, choreographers show us what is possible with our body. You know, they're the embodied practice of radicalization, you know, what that does look like. What can you do with your body that you didn't know you can do? And when someone sees what you can do with your body, it makes them think, oh, maybe I can do that too.
Right.
The first time I saw Michael Jackson moonwalk, what? He got that from somewhere.
Right.
He did not make that up. He gets credit for it. He got it from somewhere, but he was the first artist I saw do it.
Yeah.
And then it was like, what else does that mean? If he can walk backwards like that, what else can he do? Yeah. What can I do that? You know what I mean? So that's what artists do. What is possible? So that is our role. We still do that. Revered ancestor, writer, educator Tony Cade Bambara said, you know, the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. It's a very famous quote. You see it all the time because culture is revolutionary. Yeah. And standing in your power and speaking truth to power as a creative is revolutionary and is radical, which is why we know that when the powers that want to like mute that, one of the first things they do is they mute the artist. They kill the artist. They kill the poet. They kill the journalist. They burn the university. They burn the books. Because we know that the culture is power and we know that culture precedes policy. So if I change myself, if I change my family, if I can change my cultural perspective on things, I am the influencer of the policy. And if you are trying to control me politically, you're going to have to shut down the cultural workers. So the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. I cannot not do this. I must. I'm compelled. Whether it is my ancestors like pushing me forward or whatever. I mean, they are pushing us forward. So I'm compelled, right? Yeah. And then revered ancestor Nina Simone, the role of the artist is reflect the times. Here we are. Look at the poetry coming out right now while we are in the middle of watching a war, watching several wars, watching war in Sudan, in Congo, in Haiti, watching war, watching genocide in Gaza, watching genocide in Palestine, watching it go down. And at least in the United States, witnessing a very serious silence from the cultural community around it. And that has a lot to do with who controls the media, whose money funds the museum, And the art world, the so-called high-end art world, where does that money come from? And who controls the stories? And so artists are being censored because they know that what we say matters. It's powerful and it moves people. So here we are. Here we are. You know, some of us, those of us who can speak.
Speak, yeah.
And those of us who can't speak,
paint.
Do something.
Do something.
Do something.
Do something.
Do
Yes.
something. Maybe you can't speak out loud, but do something.
Yeah.
Do something. At the very least, sit at the if you believe.
Yeah.
If you believe in freedom, if you believe in this collective liberation, whatever side you're on, but that, I'm not talking about the side, but if you believe that we should be free, if you believe that we should be liberated and that we should have access to life in the way in which we choose to live it, then at least, at the very least, sit at your own table and teach your children that. Say something.
Beautiful.
Thank you for asking.
You know what? I'm not even going to come back with another question. This is going to be the end.
Okay.
I think you said it so beautifully. That's it.
Okay.
I thank you very much for coming to the studio.
Thank you for inviting me.
Giving me this just lovely conversation.
You are a delight. When do I get to interview you?
I know, right? Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This is your Pan-African show called Africa, and I hope you all have a beautiful African-American month. I mean, I know living in Ethiopia, we always celebrate it, but now let's be mindful, let's think about them, let's pray, and let's be together.
Yes.
This is your Pan-African show called Africa, and your host, Qetselawork Seifu. Thank you again.